Welcome back. Today I'm visiting Milan, which, including the metropolitan area, is the largest city in Italy. I last visited Milan in 2012, but I didn't have my GoPro then, so this is the first time for me to show you around the city. Metropolitan Milan has around 6 million people in it, and it's a very large and modern city in many ways. It reminds me a bit of some of the large northern cities in the UK. By that I mean it has trams and it has a lot of modern buildings because it was bombed heavily during the war. However, the historic core, like many northern cities, has survived relatively intact. And here we can see the main square. On the right, you have an enormous cathedral known as Il Duomo, which has been built over around 500 years. The carving took ages to finish. And then in the centre, you have the Vittorio Emanuele II gallery, which is full of luxury fashion chains, just straight ahead there. The cathedral was started in 1386, but the last of these doors was only finished in 1965, and when you look at all the detailing and the carving on the bronze casting, you can see why it took so long to finish.
Ah no, pensavo appunto che dovesse stare dentro qui.
Well, this is inside the gallery I mentioned, and it really is a temple to shopping, mirroring the cathedral outside. Well, we've seen Milan's centre of religion, its centre of commerce, and now we're going to see its old centre of defence. Just up ahead is Castle Sforza. Now, this enormous castle was the home of the Dukes of Milan for over 100 years. To give you a bit of background about how this territory, the Duchy of Milan, came to be, the Roman Empire disintegrated around 400 AD, and Italy fell apart into various provinces such as the Papal States, Milan, and Venice, and other city-states, each vying for control of territory. And because there were so many struggles and conflicts going on, it was important to have a well-defended stronghold like this one. The bulk of the present castle dates from about 1450 to about 1500, which was contemporaneous with Leonardo da Vinci, who actually lived in the castle at one point. The castle had a lot of advanced defensive features for its time, including this immense moat, which is now home to a couple of cats which I saw playing in the sunshine. This was aged right at the twilight of the castle era, and several of the fortifications were susceptible to cannon fire and had to be redeveloped, including this 8-story tower. The Renaissance castles of Italy were not as dour and defensive as the Norman castles of England. They had a lot of decorative features, such as this garden you can see here. Inside the castle is a museum including a selection of Roman ruins. The pieces here are very varied, including this bust of Theodora from the post-Roman period of the Byzantine Exarchate. She was the ruler with Justinian in Constantinople. Following on from the Roman period, you have some Romanesque church architecture, and you can see the development of sculpture and architecture until it resulted in the castle that we see today in the Renaissance. The rest of the castle has an odd selection of artifacts, some of them from the castle collections itself, and others that were given to the city over the years. A lot of the good stuff was taken because after the Dukes of Milan gave the city to the Spanish in the 1500s, it was then occupied by the Austrians, and much of the good stuff was sent back to the respective countries. There's still a few delightful things left though, like this plate which was designed in Italy, and then you also have this rather lovely chess set. At least, I think it is a chess set. And finally, some wonderful glasswork. Venice was one of the first and finest glass-making centres in Europe, and the art spread throughout Italy. There was also there was also a very small classical and classically inspired selection. Here you have some ivory diptychs from the late Roman Empire, back when Milan was the capital of the West. And here, from a much later date, you have the labours of Hercules cast as small bronzes. An unexpected delight to me as a musician was this section, which has a lot of old instruments. Here we have some shamisen from Japan, and just before you had some really old guitars. There's just so many incredibly unusual things. I think some of these are lutes, maybe from the Middle Ages. After all that time in the castle, I've made it out to Sempione Park, which is an enormous English-style park right behind it in what was the old castle grounds. Just up ahead, you can see a large triumphal arch, which was built from the Napoleonic era.
Ci pensi e poi fai finta di niente, aspetto che parli te, miliardo spacco e queste che fanno riavvicinare, che non è più storia finita come se fosse tossico, guardo lassù, non
Before we leave the park, there's one last thing I wanted to show you, which is this wonderful park library in a rather unusual modern looking building, which I think was originally an exposition pavilion. It's very peaceful here, but I'm starting to feel quite hungry, so it's now time to get lunch, Milanese style. I'm heading to a popular student haunt known as the Columns of San Lorenzo, taking the metro to get there. Around the other side of the Basilica of St Lawrence stand some genuine Roman columns known as the Columns of St Lawrence. They're probably from a bathhouse or possibly a Roman temple, and it's around here that the students and the cool kids like to gather. Far too old these days to be a student or a cool kid, so here I am in this rather fancy restaurant with some bread and peach tea about to dig into a large bowl of fruta di mare. We've got calamari, mussels, some crayfish, and I even had half a crab somewhere in there. So it's time to dig in. With lunch over, I've got one last thing to show you, which is this building just up ahead, the Basilica of St Ambrose. The original building was started as far back as 379, so it's one of the oldest churches in the city. Because of that, its basic shape is like an old Roman basilica, long and thin with a central hall held up by columns, similar to some of the oldest churches you can see in Rome or the churches in Ravenna. The yard outside is filled with paintings and fragments from the history of the church. While inside you have some decoration from a Romanesque remodelling, as well as a large mosaic just above the altar at the back. It's amazing to think that this church, where Bishop Ambrose preached over 1500 years ago, is still standing and still being used for services today. With that, I'm heading back to the hotel. See you next time for some trip out to the Italian lakes.